Just to note, I know it's a little bit dim lights. You've had a big meal. There's coffee at the back. So if anyone, their head hits the table, we'll trust that they're not actually planning their estate early, that there's a problem that they need to go get some caffeine. But, a little over a year ago, we had an estate planning event. And frankly, from the feedback we got from clients, it tended to be one of the better events I think that we've had. A lot of participation, a lot of questions. Nora Barlow, a local estate attorney, who's very good. And if we recommend people out to an attorney, she's one of the people that we use, was here and really helped to drop a lot of knowledge on us. But we got a couple of things of feedback. One, that was great. Two, can you help us? People didn't want to reach out and establish yet another relationship with somebody with more information and more stuff. And we didn't have that capability. And so, we kind of knew that some financial advisors had been doing this and doing it for a number of years, that there's different programs, different ways to do that. So we partnered with a nationwide provider who does reviews of every estate plan inside, and also has the optionality for us to reach out to local attorneys and have reviews done. So Encore Estate Plan is the name of that, and it's something that we're wanting to utilize and educate people with. So, I kind of feel like tonight I drew the shortest straw to give the talk. When we started talking about, well, who's going to talk about estate planning? My feedback is people are literally dying to avoid this topic. So I was like, how about one of you guys? A little soon, maybe, I know, but too soon. That's kind of what we're talking about tonight with estate planning. And getting it done too soon is probably better than too late. So I know it's not the most exciting topic that people might be using, but here's the reality. Estate planning it's not about death. It's about having some clarity, having some control, and really at the end of the day, it's an act of love for the people that you care about around you, right? It's not for something that if something happens to you tomorrow, those people that care for you, hopefully they're grieving, and we don't want them to have to then scramble and try to figure out, can I pay the mortgage? What's going to happen to the house? All that kind of stuff. And we've had, I think personally, just in-house this calendar year, so it's only April 28th, at least I can think of offhand just 8 different people who walked through the door either as clients or as prospects or as people who were talking, hey, we need some help because so-and-so died, my spouse died, my mother died, we don't know what to do in this case. So, but first, hey, Josh, next slide maybe. The fine print. It's not too fine, but we are not attorneys. What does that mean? We cannot give legal advice. We can educate. We can help our clients understand what best practices typically are. We can actually describe what happens, but we cannot prescribe. So there's there is a difference there. So this isn't for, what we do isn't going to work for every single client. I think it will work for most clients, but it's important for us to kind of disclose that. In this instance, we cannot give legal advice, but we can help individuals through transcribing and working through the partners that we have to actually build wills and trusts for them in-house. So why are we here? Really, if we go to the next slide, there's been do-it-yourself software for 25 years now. Some of it is very, very good. There has been estate attorneys for much longer than that, but yet still 2/3 of people in the United States, 2/3 of adults have no plan whatsoever, right? So that's why we have people come into our offices. I guess it's good for business, but nonetheless, we'd rather be helping people kind of sort through, how do we help you further your life and make it the best it can be with the finances you have, not trying to deal with an emergency that you don't know or what to do in this instance. Who's to blame? I would say there's the top 3 reasons of procrastination, and procrastination. Really, who wants to talk about, who woke up this morning saying, let's talk about what happens when I die? These other things, financial and legal professional guilt tripping, there's a lot. I'm kind of doing it now, I guess. But maybe that's an encumbrance. Sometimes you read about things in the newspaper. It can be intimidating. There's a lot of legalese. There's different terms, I think, Josh, on the next page. Persterpes, that sounds like something that's kind of contagious to me. A step up in cost basis, I think, is the morning workout I did this morning. And then, you've got things like probate. I'm not exactly sure what's being probed there or who's being probed. But, there's lots of words. Irrevocable trust. What's the difference between a revocable living trust, an irrevocable trust, a will? Why might I use one versus the other? Slats, cruts, there's all kinds of crazy stuff. But there's a better way for us to estate plan. We think that we can help to incorporate people's wants and wishes and what they really want to achieve with their families and with the money that they've worked hard to save, to invest all their life. If something happens to them that they don't expect prematurely, and like Chad said at the start, eventually all of us are going to die. And making sure that your spouse or your kids or those that you care about are taken care of is important. So what we'll cover today, we've got some things in the agenda. What's estate planning about? Estate planning demystified a bit. How to get it done. Really, we'll cover some of the basics. What is a will? What's a trust? Why might you do one versus the other? How does this interact with beneficiaries in this instance? And then importantly, what decisions? A lot of people think about this as it's procrastinated because it's some time off in the distance. It's not going to affect me. But what are some decisions and things that you can do today to affect change or to impact your life? Just as a show of hands, has anyone here ever served as like an executor or a trustee? What was it like? What's that? Was it?
Yeah, mine was pretty comfortable. I helped for my mother.
Okay.
And I met with the attorney and helped him set up the plan, so I had a pretty good understanding of it.
Okay. Was it a trust or was it a will? It was a trust. And I saw a couple of hands go up, but were you an executor or trustee?
Mine was pretty easy with my parents, because we already knew exactly what my parents wanted. They had it in their will. My siblings and I got along really well, so that was super easy. But parts of it was hell, because it's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of going in different places.
Yeah.
With the death certificate, so that's the legwork of it.
Yeah, it can be a full-time job. It can be a lot of work for people. And so, one thing that you want to communication is utmost and very important. But another show of hands, maybe, does anyone here have a written plan already, whether it's a will and a trust, even if it's out of date? We got some. Well, just for a finer point, each and every one of you actually already has a plan in place. If you don't have it written down, it's what the government's got written down for you. We can go on to the next slide, but no one says, hey, I want to have a judge decide what happens to me the day that I die with all the money that I've got or all the things that I want, the people that I want to care for. But what is estate planning at its core? I think it really is, it's an act of love, right? It's caring about the people that are around you, that they're not having to be burdened with something that can be extremely worrisome, extremely painstaking at a time when they're actually grieving for you. It's instructions for your loved ones so that they know what you want to have happen to you, how you want to be cared for, both when you're alive and someday when you're gone. It also gives you some control over everything that you've worked hard for through time. We can go on to the next slide, but It's a nice little comic here. Bart Simpson, repeat after me. If you don't have an estate plan, the government has one for you. But what's an estate plan? We've got some terms here, and it's important for us to probably to walk through some of those key terms. Definitions, just to get our bearings. An estate, that's all the assets that you have, whether it's a home, whether it's a rental home, a business, maybe your 401ks. It might be mom's wedding ring, mementos of the family. All of those things make up your estate. Everything that you've accumulated over your life, right? 401ks, accounts. What is probate? That's the process that a person walks through, whether it's through a will or if they die intestate, meaning they have no will, that their estate will go through when they pass away, so that their assets are divvied up either according to how their will was specified or how the state specifies if they did not have a will at the time of their death. And then in the estate plan, it spells out who gets your assets and how they get them when you're incapacitated, whether it could be coma or dead or something else. It's a must-have part of your financial plan. A lot of times I think the best way to think about or to walk through this is just to have an example. And the easiest thing I was thinking of is just an example couple. What would it look like when they walk into our office, or frankly any office, if they were to sit down with someone and talk about what it is for an estate plan? And I think really the first questions for us would be what's meaningful for you, right? Every family is a little bit different. We all have different relationships with our in-laws. Hopefully they're not outlaws. But maybe one spouse handles all the money and another spouse is more of a participant who just makes sure the other spouse doesn't buy a bigger boat or do something crazy with all the money that they've got. Maybe you've got kids that you're wanting to care for. Maybe they've got a kid with special needs, a grandchild with special needs that they want to make sure that they can leave money for, but maybe not encumber their capacity to qualify for aid that the state might provide, right? Maybe you've got one of those kids that you love dearly, but you just don't want to hand over a huge sum of money the day they turn 18, or the day they turn even 25, or possibly even 30, I don't know. It allows you to give some control in some aspect of what you're going to do with that money that you've accumulated, that stuff that you've accumulated. And really, the first thing that people always want to talk about is, where does my stuff go? Where does my stuff go? And that's the first thing on their mind. But if we're to talk about this chronologically, really the first point of concern, or what we want to handle, is what happens to you while you're still alive? What happens tomorrow if you have a stroke, you get in a car accident and can't sign your name or can't talk to your doctor, or you're in surgery and something doesn't go right and you're incapacitated for a number of days, weeks, or possibly months. That's where things like power of attorney and advanced healthcare directives, maybe HIPAA type of documents, will come into play. Authorizations. They allow someone that you trust to take over and to make those decisions. And typically this is where, spouses kind of point at each other and go, you're in control of this, right? And that's typically what you're going to see. Spouses are going to take over for something like that. Sometimes you may want to have there may be reasons to have a different alternative, but what happens if your spouse is no longer alive or they were in the car wreck with you, right? You want to have some form of alternative. In this case, quite often an adult child, maybe a sibling, someone that you trust in your life. And this can get real fast, right? These are things like, what happens, do I want to be kept in a feeding tube? If so, for how long? What type of help do I want to have if I'm incapacitated and the doctor says, hey, they're not likely to ever come back from this? Who decides when to pull the plug? I'm hoping my wife will be reluctant to do that. for a little time, but I'm not sure. We'll see. Light topic, I know, and this is, most people do name their spouse in this, but what if something happens to them? I think it's important to also think about who else could stand in their place if something like that. Because really the goal of this is pretty simple. If something happens to you tomorrow, we don't want your life to disintegrate into chaos where you can't sign for a bank account, you can't sell a property, you can't transact the normal financial business or have someone that can talk to your doctor for you. What else is in an estate plan? And again, quite often after you've dealt with those things of what happens while you're still alive, couples always revert back to what happens to us when both of us die. Where does this stuff that we've accumulated go in handling it? But that's not, generally speaking, how things actually work. Usually one spouse passes away. And if we just use, as our example couple, John and Jane Doe, because I have, lack of any other creativity. But let's just say they're worth $2 million, right? As an example couple. And John says, hey, I'm older. People in my family don't live as long. I'm likely to pass away first. John, what do you want to have happen to the money that you've saved? Let's just cut the estate in half. Is there something, do you want this money that you've accumulated just to go to Jane in an ownership perspective? That can be a pretty simple, clean, and easy way to do things through both beneficiaries and a will. But it also has zero protections, right? Jane may meet somebody else, right? And she may decide, hey, I'm going to get married again. And that's perfectly normal. That's part of life. But life can get messy. And if they don't go through some of their accounts, they don't change things like beneficiaries on them distinctly to children, those types of things. Any money that they have in their name, if something happened to them the day after they get married and it goes through probate, goes straight to that new spouse. So there's really a lack of control. Option number 2 is you can leave your estate to your spouse in a trust where they are possibly the trustee and the beneficiary. It allows them to spend the money. They have control over the money and all the assets that are in it, but they're not legally speaking the owner. So if something happened to them tomorrow or the next day or 10 years from now after they've remarried to somebody else and their life has progressed, emotions get involved, that money is actually set aside for who it's originally intended for. And that would be, generally speaking, we're going to talk about the kids that you had together through a relationship and a family for a number of years. But, life happens. Jane might meet Jack. Jack could be a great guy. He could be a complete fraud for all we know. We don't really know. But the point here is that either way, life changes, beneficiaries sometimes get ignored, and decisions get made under emotion. So what trust really says, Jane, you can use this money, but that money is being protected for what it ultimately goes for, and that's the kids. And this is kind of where we get up to, I guess, where people really start to think about estate planning. Where does my stuff go when I pass away? How does this work? What happens to my stuff? The assets that we've worked hard to accumulate. And quite often they want everything. It's pretty general practice to have everything to go to their kids. And let's just say that they have 4 kids, all of which, the $2 million estate, so equally divided, each one gets $500,000. But let's hypothesize maybe they've got, one of their boys, Johnny Jr., who's got a bad picker. He keeps picking the wrong spouse over and over and over again. He's been married a couple times, and the wife he has now, the parents aren't exactly enthusiastic about. Is there a way to kind of protect that person, those assets that were yours that you accumulated for their benefit that they're going to have from that spouse. And that's where a trust can come into play. You can have things like Johnny's inheritance trust, where he is both the trustee and the beneficiary, where those assets stay legally separate from the marriage and are more protected at a time when they go through, or if they went through a divorce with that. What if you have minor children? I'm in a situation where I've got still one minor kid and then 2 adults. They're college age. So I'm kind of like caught right in between. Do I want my daughter, if something happened to me and my wife tomorrow at 18, to get all that we've saved and accumulated, or do I want her to get half at 25 and half at 30, or maybe a third at different time periods? That can be both a blessing and a curse. Getting a lot of money at a young age, a lot of people just have a tendency to blow it and not necessarily appreciate it. But what about those kids that are young? At some point, if they're, let's just say 9, 11, 13, and 15 now, and your sister Karen's in charge of being both the trustee for the assets that are caring for them, but also eventually you're going to want those kids probably to have the assets themselves. So you have the control through a trust of actually saying, hey, there's certain stipulations that I want to be met. It's usually can be age. It can be things like graduating from college or high school. It can be up to Karen, the trustee, when this kid ultimately is able to and capable of handling the money on their own to make a decision. Those are all things that, through estate planning, you have more control and more capacity to handle. Special needs situations, like we talked about, those are also pretty important things to think about. But next slide, a trust is only as good as what you've put into it. Or one thing that people always kind of forget is your estate plan is not complete until it's been funded. And this is where we talk about, beneficiaries. It's really the silent deal breaker quite often with estate planning. The part that surprises people is that it doesn't matter what you, quite often surprise people, it doesn't matter what's in your will or what's in a trust. If you've named a beneficiary, it's your ex-wife from 2007 who's the beneficiary still in your 401k, and you pass away tomorrow, that 401k is going straight to her. And nothing says awkward funeral quite like the ex-wife from 20 years ago getting your 401k. We have, believe it or not, seen stuff like that. It's probably easy to believe. But people have the capacity to either leave accounts like all the accounts that we manage, whether it's IRAs, Roth IRAs, brokerage accounts, bank accounts, any type of thing, they have to have beneficiaries named. If they don't have beneficiaries named, it goes to probate and goes to court. Okay, so they pass, you can name things like a trust as a beneficiary. You cannot name a will as a beneficiary. If it goes into a trust, then it's distributed as according to how a trust is operated. If it goes directly to the individual, whether it's your wife, your spouse, your kids, that's how it goes directly through and passes away from probate. The questions about that?
Is there a tax event to the beneficiary? If it's in
Generally speaking, no. Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me repeat the question. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, if it's in a trust.
Whether it's in a trust or passed through a will. At the event, Chad, you repeated the question for the Zoom. Is that right? Yeah. The question was, how are taxes handled? Is there a tax at the time of death? The answer is no in most instances. The estate plan, the estate exclusionary tax per individual is at $12 million. I think it's 12.04 or something like that per person. So if an estate is in excess of that, we're not basically the right person to be helping you with any type of estate planning. We're gonna send you to an attorney because that gets pretty specialized. That's where taxes would happen. Now, if you inherited an IRA, for instance, from your parent or a sibling or anybody else like that, you do have to pay taxes on their IRA as you distribute it or have it distributed to you. Does that make sense? Question?
On that inherited IRA, there was a time limit to withdraw that money, correct?
Yes. Right now, it's sorry. The question was if it's an inherited IRA, is there a time limit that the money has to be distributed? And the answer is yes. Now there's limitations with the new 2007, not new anymore, but 2017 tax bill. It's now restricted to 10 years. I think it was for anyone who passed away after 21. I'd have to go back and check that for what. But let's conclude here with some slides, and then we'll maybe get Chad up here and the other advisors who want to join and try to answer some questions. And we have some actually real life examples of things that we've seen walk through the door here at Veritas over the last number of years and even this year. But your estate plan is done when you can kind of answer these 5 questions. Who gets your assets when you pass away, right? How will they get your assets? Who will make financial decisions for you when you're not able to? I think that's a very important one and quite often overlooked. Who will make healthcare decisions for you when you're not able to? And who will have, of course, probably the most important in some respects would be if you have minor children, who will have legal custody of them, making sure that they're taken care of.
Another question, you brought up minor children. So
Go ahead.
You have a minor child, and they age out to where they're an adult.
Yeah?
Does that person still have, the person who, trustee, I guess, are they still able to control that money of the person who's aged out?
So the question was, if you had a minor child, let's say hypothetically you wrote a trust today, it cared for them, and 10 years from now they're 28 years old or they're 25 years old. Whomever you have set up as the trustee of the trust controls the money and how it's distributed. They must distribute it how the trust is written. So if you've written the trust so that your children get the money or get the assets, and I keep using the money, but everything that's inside that of estate at 25 and 30 is their responsibility to make sure that that money moves from there to there. At some point,
You have to say at 25, they now have the responsibility of their own?
yes,
That trustee will have it until they pass?
it would be the trustee's responsibility until the day that, if that's the way it's written, until they turn 25.
But if you don't have that age in there?
Then that is something you would specify when you write a trust. It could be at 18. It could be at 30. It's really up to you as an individual, what you deem relevant for your family. Who are your beneficiaries? Generally speaking, they're going to be a spouse first. Children, maybe some charities that you care about. Churches quite often can be named as a beneficiary for some specific things. How will you get your assets, i.e. bank accounts? Are they paid out on death to a trust, or are they paid directly to individuals, beneficiaries that you have? Those are important considerations to think about. Who's the one handling your money? That's what you just talked about. That's the trustee. And it might change through time, right? You have minor children now, and they're I've got a 17-year-old, my youngest, and I've up to a 23-year-old. That's likely, I hope to still be alive when they're, in their 30s. But it's likely that my trustee will probably change through time. And I may decide that, hey, now my kid or my children, who will ultimately, if something happens to my wife and I, will get what we've accumulated, that where they become both the beneficiary and possibly the trustee of something like that. Does that kind of address what you were asking or talking about?
I think it
Okay.
If I didn't establish an age for the individual and they are now an adult.
It's something we would specify for sure. And if it's not specified, it's when they become an adult, 18 years old.
It becomes, I didn't hear.
It's when they're an adult at 18 legally. Yeah, if you don't specify it.
If you don't specify.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You know, who's, and generally a trustee, quite often the same person's going to be number 3, 4, and 5. Who's the one handling your money? Who's the one deciding on your health care? Who is responsible for your kids? You know, possibly we have retirees that they have pets and they care a lot about them. They don't want them to be homeless at some point in time. And we can move on there, but there's 3 ways to really get your estate plan done. You can do it yourself, and there are a lot of good programs, a lot of good online resources that people can use to write their own wills or trusts. I've looked some of them over. They can be high quality. You can do it together with someone like us. We have access to a lot of your accounts, your beneficiaries, if you're a client with us, a lot of your information already. You can also have it done for you with an attorney. And in some cases, there's going to be specific instances where we're going to say, you really need to seek specific legal advice. Your situation just warrants it with what you've got here. Is your estate plan out of date? Some of you raised your hand that you have an estate plan. You know, I recently redid mine. I gave you my kid's age. My last time I did it, I think my 17-year-old was a newborn. And basically it was pretty dated. I had the kids going to my brother, which was a big mistake. He's around here somewhere. But no, he's around here somewhere. But yeah, we've changed that. But you know, we can actually make with Encore's partnership, we can make some nice diagrams that are very helpful for both trustees and also for the people who matter in your life. You know, quite often I work as a financial advisor. My wife isn't as attuned to the finances as I am. It's because I work in this business. That's quite often how our relationships work. One spouse deals with it a lot more than another, and they're more familiar. So I make sure that she understands, here's what we have, and here's where it's at, and here's how it's handled. If something happened to me tomorrow, you know, here's how you can handle those types of things. And our trustees are also have been informed on that stuff. So, you know, this is what maybe some kind of visual summary would look like of an existing estate plan. You know, just overarching diagrams that are easy to understand for most lay people. Important contacts and where your important assets are. If you're anything like me, and a lot of you are, you have sometimes workplace savings plans, IRAs, Roth IRAs, that's for you and your wife, sometimes 529s for 3 or 4 kids. You've got bank accounts for a business, bank accounts for you personally, maybe bank accounts for you and your wife jointly, bank account for your kid. It can get to be, I mean, just a chore to keep track of all of this stuff. And having it in one space, one place, is extremely helpful for anyone who's not as familiar with the assets and what goes on. Let's just leave you with some, you know, action items.
A question from the Zoom, if you have a second.
Can we take it in just a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, let's just this last slide, and then hopefully everyone can get up and get coffee while we answer questions in case we put them to sleep. But here's some things to do when you get home today. Some action. Like a trust only being as good as it's funded, your estate plan is only as good as it's known to loved ones. And I think that's a real important one. Communicating to a spouse, to maybe kids, adult children, or a trustee, you know, what you have, where it is, and that they have, making sure that they're okay with the responsibility. We have a couple people that served as executors and trustees. It can be a lot of work. Making sure that they're on board with that they're both willing, capable, and of doing that. You know, check that your estate plan's up to date. If not, we can try to help with that. Make sure that those key people know where things are at, what is in place. check all your financial account beneficiaries. I know Corey, online at Plan Member, people that have accounts with us, they can go straight to their website interaction and actually name beneficiaries. Anyone who onboards with us, I know that we're pretty meticulous about making sure that they have some type of beneficiary named, whether it's their if they're not married or don't have kids, it's something that this is going to go to. It's a sister, it's a brother, it's a church, it's something that they care about. It's too easy. It's very expensive to go through probate. It can be very time consuming. And then get a digital copy. I mean, that's one nice thing about this is I was able to put on, for my wife's computer, a little financial folder. It's got our estate plan, where our bank accounts are. I did it for my trustee as well, so that they know if something happened to us tomorrow, hey, I can go to this. It might take me a little time to figure out, but I've got a place, a place that I keep up to date of resources to rely on. And I think maybe what we'll do, Logan, that kind of concludes what I wanted to talk about. But why don't we go, Chad can come up, and I know some stuff, and I'm not sure Greg or Jared, if any of you want to come up too, it's fine. But we got a Zoom question?
Yeah.
Let's go for it. And do I need to repeat it?
Yes, please, yeah.
Okay.
People online.
Chad's going to answer this one.
Uh-oh. Softball, please.
How important is it to have assets such as homes owned on the trust name rather than in your name?
So the question is, why is it so important to have hard assets like a home, I'm guessing business, property, things like that, in a trust rather than in your own personal name? I'm going to answer part of this question. That's actually one of the big breakdowns that we see in trusts is people go to all this trouble to create a trust and then never fund it. It's like driving all the way down the field and then fumbling at the 1 yard line. And you have to, if you go to the trouble of building a trust, you have to have assets then retitled to the trust, because if you have a house that is not in a trust, you pass away, your spouse passes away, then the house or the asset, whatever it is, will go through probate and you lose the benefit of the trust. So that's actually one of the really cool things about Encore that made me excited is that that's part of what they do is they will retitle assets, because that's just where I've seen it.
Yeah.
So here's the breakdowns that I've seen is people come to our office, we talk, we build a financial plan, retirement income strategy, all these different things. Almost all of our people who are retired now have more money now than when they retired. So the assets are continuing to grow, which means the problem, it's not a bad problem to have. Don't complain to your friends you have more money now than you ever had. They won't feel sorry for you. But we still need to have a plan around that. And people say, yep, I need a will or I need a trust. And we give them some names. We'd send them out the door. They come meet with us a few months later. We go over their financial plan. We'd say, how'd that meeting with so-and-so go? I never talked to him. I'm really sorry. I'll do it again. I mean, I've had people, we've gone through this for years. Some of you are in this room. I'm not going to look at you because that'll make it awkward. But even for those people who go then get the trust, who are miles ahead of most people, or the will, don't always retitle assets. So that's just, it's a big, important part of this, because you lose all the benefit if your assets or beneficiaries aren't adjusted to account for the work that you did to create the trust.
Yeah, and I think Nora last year used an analogy, and it's a good one. There's a lot of other ways you could do it, but of a grocery bag, right? We could go into the grocery store, and I've tried it before, have eggs under here and an apple in one hand and walking out with, 5 or 6 different things, or we could put it all into a grocery bag together and carry it out. And if I have to empty my hands, I can go, here, Chad, you're my executor. Can you take my grocery bag and be responsible for it? And he can carry it. If I have to try to do this and give him everything, then it's a problem.
It becomes a scavenger hunt.
Yeah, it becomes a scavenger hunt.
That
your
children and grandchildren have to do. And I mean, I can just tell you, as somebody with 6 kids, I mean, every time we leave the house, it feels like a scavenger hunt. The shoes are never were supposed to be. The keys never were supposed to be. I asked my wife, well, where'd you put Barrett's coat? Where's his coat? Well, it's supposed to be on the hook. I was like, I know it's supposed to be there.
My
But-
parents forgot me, so I mean,
Exactly. So I know how stressful this is, just trying to get kids out the door. You're in the midst of losing a spouse and you're doing a scavenger hunt through somebody's most valuable possessions. I've seen it tear apart families, not just add stress, but somebody mentioned like our siblings, we have a great relationship. I've seen it start that way
Yeah.
and finish very different. So one other point that just to piggyback on something you said earlier about communication, a trust or a will, and guys, just so you know, like a will is minimum standard response. Not everybody needs a trust. But a will is pretty much just basic. Everybody in this room should have a will. But whether you have a will or a trust, it does not give us a free pass from communicating with our kids or our spouse or our grandkids.
or executors or trustees or anybody like that.
Yep. I've talked to people who are like, no, I hired this, high flying attorney and we did a really nice trust and my kids are going to have a nice surprise when I die. Like that's just not the way to do it. Like even with a really good estate plan, if you've not communicated this stuff ahead of time, it can still be a disaster. And we can help you communicate this stuff too, but just this is not the easy button. This is part of an overarching plan.
Yeah, even with it done right, it's still going to be a time of high stress, of concern, and frankly, there's still, passwords, chasing down stuff like that, and they're still hard to get. But any other questions from that? We got one from the crowd.
Go probate and the trust avoids probate.
Yeah, so the question was, does a will go through probate and does a trust avoid it? That would be the primary, yes is the quick answer to that. Your will is instructions for the judge, for the probate court in this instance. It's, hey, I want X to go to these different individuals and here's how it's to be handled. A trust entirely avoids probate, where that is handled as long as things are put inside of the trust. Great clarification. Things like homes, deeded property. How about your automobile? I was thinking I probably have one or two cars where my wife wasn't there or something. I just put my own name on the title. She may not, I'm not for sure she's on all the titles. So making sure, going through all that type of stuff, it's just more things to make sure it's handled outside of probate. Anyone who builds a trust to us will have what's called a pour over will. So anything that wasn't explicitly put into the trust would go into the trust eventually, but those assets would have to go through probate if they're not properly titled or deeded. Jeff, you had did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff.
So are there reasons that a will would be better than a trust? Or why is a trust better than one of the top 2 or 3 reasons you want to do it? It sounds like not going to probate would be a good reason to have a trust.
So the question is, what are the benefits for having, say, a trust over a will?
Yeah. Or benefits of will.
Can you go back to the slide, Josh, with the Fab Five? Go ahead.
So probably, let's talk about some of the cons of a trust. It's going to have a little bit more paperwork, higher expense. Not it's not a deal breaker. Making sure that it stays updated. Those are some things. It is, what are some of the pros? It's easier to change things, such as, we talked about kids that age up from being 15 or 14 years old to now they're 30 years old. How do we handle that now? Wills do go through probate, which if your assets are handled through a will, it is much cheaper, much easier than going through probate court, but without one. But you still likely are going to incorporate and get an attorney. You are still going to have to file paperwork. And it's probably maybe the most important thing is it can still take time, right? It might be until things are all switched over and properly deeded and changed. It can be, depending on the situation, the complexity, it can be sometimes months to years in time frame. So those would be some of the rationale and reasons as to why you might have a trust versus a will. A will is probably adequate for a lot of people. There are ways to handle things like homes outside of trust. You can have paid on death deeds. They can be a little bit more complex or hard to make so that they can go to multiple beneficiaries. But there are ways to handle that type of stuff outside of it. And of course, financial accounts, I kind of covered that. You can very easily have multiple beneficiaries and something like that. But it might be, if you're trying to protect Johnny Jr. in my example from a spouse who you don't really trust. I'm kind of playing words, trust and trust. But is there a way that I can go about protecting those assets? And that's where maybe instead of naming Johnny as a beneficiary, you name a trust as a beneficiary. You cannot do that with a will. You have more control with access to a trust than you do with a will. A will is once you pass away and you've done stuff with assets, it's to the person. It's under their control. You can't make any stipulations of age, of conditions, anything like that.
It's a lot more precise and specific. But what I want to bring this slide up for, and thank you, Josh, wherever he went. A will address 1, 3, 4, and 5. If you have some of these other advanced healthcare directives and things, and a lot of people will offer advanced healthcare directives with a will. But how your beneficiaries get your assets, a will does not do a very good job of that. Who, maybe, but when and how, it doesn't. So just is a little silly, but for example, if Gerard asked for some chicken, and one way to say it would, I would like some chicken on my lettuce. I want only white meat, and I want 4 ounces. I'm like, geez, man, like I'm doing you a favor. You're making it really hard. But he's very specific. Rather than I go in the back, I grab a handful of chicken. I wait till he's not looking. I just throw it at him. I'm still getting him chicken, but how and when are completely. That's again, it's a little bit silly, but your beneficiaries can feel like this, where they're getting assets just chucked at them. They're not really ready to handle what those things are because the how of this hasn't been addressed. Fair enough?
I think that's great.
Before we get on that question, you touched on something else. It's about deeds on a house. Why is it a bad idea typically? Why is it a delicate situation for me to put my house in my kids' names? And instead of putting it in a trust or doing a transfer on death deed, why shouldn't I just put it in my kids' names and like I got that done, that part's over with?
Probably one of the biggest, most classical mistakes that we've seen.
Okay,
so there's Step Up in Basis, that workout program I was talking about. It's not really what it was, but Step Up in Basis, when you pass away, any assets that you have. So let's just, as an example, say you bought a home 20 years ago for 200 grand, and now that home is worth $1 million. Not that uncommon, actually, a 30 or 40 year type of home in places like California, or even in certain parts of Anchorage. At your death, that basis gets stepped up from $200,000 to $1 million. And if they go sell that home, there is no capital gain in that instance, right? If they're on the title and joint with that, they are a joint holder with you, okay? If something happens to you, they own the home now too, but their basis is still stuck at $200,000. So they go sell that home for $1 million. There's an $800,000 gain. They essentially are going to have to pay about 20% of that gain to Uncle Sam. Is that?
Yeah, and that's like so you said,
it's a poor idea, and it also we've seen. I had a couple come in who had I can't remember, their sister was going to take care of the kids if something happened to them. They had named their sister as the beneficiary in their 401ks and IRAs and that type of stuff. Not a good idea again. Your kids will have a person who's in charge of it while they're under 18. But if you name your sister as the beneficiary, she's both the owner and also the tax person, right? So she's probably at, making some money, her and her husband, assuming, and they're going to be in a 25, maybe 30% tax bracket and paying taxes at that rate. And they're forced to take the money out in 10 years. Whereas if it's minor children, they do not have to take that money out until they're at least 18. And in some states, you can actually make a case for much older, 26. So I kind of went down another tangent.
No, but it's good
there,
because
but-
we've been in situations multiple times where people often come to us in the middle of an estate mess.
Yeah.
Because, financial planning, kind of like estate plan, is one of those things that often need some sort of triggering event. Maybe it's you just got, severance package at work, or you just got a new job, or you get a new boss, you can't stand the guy, whatever. But there's usually some pain that causes people like, okay, I need to put a plan together. Well, sometimes that pain is being in the middle of a messy estate situation. We've seen situations where instead of naming a child as an executor, they name the child as the beneficiary, assuming that now the oldest daughter is going to distribute all these assets. So now somebody asked a question earlier about the tax implications. Well, so the daughter now inherits the money, no tax implications. And the will stipulates that she is supposed to distribute this money to, let's say, her siblings. Let's say there's $1 million in the estate. So she gets $1 million, now has to take that money and distribute it, $200,000 a piece to her 4 siblings, and paying taxes on $800,000 that she took out. And it could be devastating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's things these are well-intentioned, but poorly executed, poorly designed plans. We had another question.
But your company, I already have my asset. So even if I change it, what I want to happen with your stuff, the way the IRA is set up, the beneficiaries, I would have to change it with you because the will cannot supersede that.
So the question is, I'm just going to kind of summarize this a little bit, but the question is basically, does changing my beneficiaries change how my will is executed or vice versa? And really that stream only flows one way. The beneficiaries are one of the strongest designators in your estate plan. So if you have a will or a trust, let's say in my trust, or let's say my will, my money is distributed to all my 6 kids evenly. But on my beneficiaries, it's all going to the oldest. Well, what's going to happen is they're going to look at that account when they go through my estate documents, and it's supposed to go to all 6 kids. Well, that account's empty because it's already been distributed to my one beneficiary. So the beneficiaries supersede or trump the will. So it cuts both ways. If your beneficiaries are correct, this is a very, very powerful estate planning step. It's very, very easy, whether that's paid to a trust or however that needs to look. But don't miss it, because like Brandon was saying, we've had situations, people come to us too, where their spouse passes away and the ex-wife,
Yeah.
or a father-in-law.
None of my clients did that. They're only yours.
I've had a few, 20 years, seen some stuff, but again, like it does happen, and it could be so easily, even without a trust, could be so easily circumvented.
Neither story, but could you theoretically make like the trust the beneficiary of your life insurance policy, not a person?
So
or like a 401k to pay to the trust rather than, so that you're putting the whole faith in the trust rather than in the listing beneficiaries, or?
the question is, can I name a trust as the beneficiary of a specific account? And the answer is yes. And if you have minor children, it's more than likely that you're going to want to name that trust as the beneficiary. If you do not, if you name kids directly, generally a spouse is going to be the first beneficiary. But if something happened to you together, the day they turn 18, that chunk of money is their money. If it's not handled through some form of a trust. Does that answer your question? You can, and quite often it depends on the situation, name directly a trusted beneficiary. When you start getting to everyone's an adult and hey, this is going to be distributed, it's quite often much easier just to go straight instead of going through a different vehicle, going from the account to a trust, then to a beneficiary to be distributed. It can go straight to a beneficiary. We had a couple of questions here, and then Logan, I think maybe end of Zoom. Right here, and then Jeff.
Medical app.
Yeah. I probably know enough just to get myself.
So
in
just real
trouble
quick,
on
the
that.
question is,
Yeah.
what type of planning can you do to protect your assets from a medical catastrophe?
It's probably one where you're going to want to engage with an attorney. There are irrevocable trusts that can be set up, and that is essentially putting your money in a spot where you're not necessarily, you may be able to get some benefit from it, but it is not any longer your money legally. I know that there's a look back time period of about 5 years for that. But that's probably beyond the scope of what we can probably talk about today with much more knowledge than that. Now, for beneficiaries, children or with special needs or something like that, that can be a lot more straightforward because it starts off as your asset and then it passes to a trust. It's never their money. They can benefit from it. They can draw distributions from it for the rest of their life. And it's still not necessary. It's for their benefit, but legally speaking, it's a separate entity. And that's how a child or somebody like that could stay eligible for benefits that might be provided by the state through, say, Medicaid or something like that. Jeff, you had a question?
Like, four well, that place bait. What I'm getting at is what if you own a home in one state, another home in another state? Your kids are in different states, and fill it out, get it started in Alaska, I mean, that.
Then you go to prison.
Yeah.
You go to right to prison. So I'll repeat the question, then you
Yeah.
go for it. So the question is, what if I have assets and or beneficiaries in multiple states? What if my stuff being family or assets is spread out all over the place? Fair enough?
Probably I didn't list this as one of the reasons why you might want to have a trust, but I have homes in multiple states. And that's part of the reason if something happened to
And
me
kids.
and my wife, yeah, and kids, frankly, for that matter. If something happened to me tomorrow and I didn't have some form of a trust or paid on death deed, I would have to go through probate in every state where I have assets. I technically actually have like a car in Virginia with my daughter at school. I've got a house in a different state. I could
It'll get messy quick.
It could get messy fast. I could be in probate in 3 states pretty fast. Yeah, that would be an excellent, probably one of the primary, if you have, I would say, investment related assets like real estate, rental homes, fourplexes, what have you, or homes, vacation homes in other states. You're talking about, you're going to have to go through probate in every state that you're in if it's not taken care of in some form of either paid on death deed or a trust.
That was one of the things that, sorry, we'll get you just a second, sir, but made me excited about Encore as well. And Brandon mentioned, like, so we are not attorneys. We didn't go online and get our law degree overnight or something. In this process, we are facilitators. But Encore, this is a nationwide group that we partner with, has attorneys in all 50 states. So it makes this a lot easier if you have kids' assets in different states. We're not trying to go find an attorney down in Washington or New Mexico or something like that. It allows us to facilitate, but we have this partnership. And if there are more complications, we can get an attorney on the line from that or licensed in that state to work through that. It's just some of these, like some Medicare trust, or if a trust is overly complex, we'd probably refer you out. But this is this is a nice feature of this because we do have a lot of people
Mhm.
who do have second homes out of state or move out of state, retire somewhere, they do a snowbird thing or just all kinds of different things. And their assets are no longer localized.
Yeah, you have a rental real estate, you know, who gets paid the rent and when and why and how does the mortgage get dealt with? Like, you know, 6 months lag in that is a big problem.
We had a question back here first.
Different states can handle that
What is it?
differently. Sorry, the question was, can I explain a paid on death deed? Much like a paid on death account that you would have at a bank or with a transfer on death is what we call it with a death, excuse me. DEATH. Sorry, I'll try to enunciate into this a little bit better. You can actually have a paid on death deed. It could transfer an asset into a trust at that time of death. Or it could transfer that deed to a child or another beneficiary that you want at death. They're pretty, I've looked at them online, the state of Alaska, you can Google it. You have to fill it out, go get it notarized, take it down to the courthouse and basically file it. And you can look them up. I know a few clients who have them. Yeah. Every state differs. Some, I don't know all the states. Some states do not have that. I think most do though. And there was something else over on the left.
Saving them up for you. Okay. So I'm assuming that the Encore estate planning also includes a certificate of trust as one of its documents that it produces. Because when you go to finance something, you have to have a trust or you're doing investments or whatever, people want to know what's happening and say, well, I have a trust. I'm not going to show everybody the details of my trust. They can see that I have a certificate. Yes?
So the question was about a certificate of trust in financing a home. Yes, it'll produce a certificate of trust. It'll say, you know, so-and-so trust, and it'll have your signatures, it'll have a notary and establishment of that. And that's all that would typically be needed to show to someone like us, like if you want a beneficiary, or some people have their accounts directly into a trust, or if you are financing a home.
The ability to update this for 5 years, things have changed, you purchase property in the Bahamas or whatever.
Yeah. Different country.
Yeah.
So the question was progressing through time. How does that adapt and change for, in this instance, it could be a will, it could be a trust. I'm not going to venture to guess in the Bahamas. That's a different country. But if you were to say purchase, let's say you just move tomorrow, you sell your home you're in, you buy a new home, you would likely, through that process, deed it into a trust in that time period. If you were to buy a new vacation home in another state or another country, I would definitely.
So maybe a better example would be we now have more grandchildren 5 years later.
Can I broaden it even more?
Yeah.
How easy is it to update a trust?
How easy? It's actually fairly easy. Is that a good answer? Depend. I mean, if you need to change trustees, we can do that through. We can personally do that through Encore Estate Plan with existing plans that were written through them. If you want to change beneficiaries or the conditions that they might receive that money, that can be changed. It's generally speaking something that's just an amendment that's rewritten to a given trust, similar to some of the other things.
An additional cost for you to do that? Is that you see that before?
There will be a cost for it. I don't know precisely.
All right, then I understand that funding a trust means basically retitling or designating the beneficiary of that have to the trust.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess I'm just confirming. Oh, I know. Does the software, the Encore program, prompt you on how to do that? Because I wouldn't really know how to retitle something right now.
So the question is about titling assets, specifically, probably most importantly, deeding property. That is probably the primary reason why we decided to go with Encore as a partner. Chad hit on it for a minute, but even to my knowledge, last year when we had Nora here, that's something that she leaves up to the individuals to get done. And it's quite often something that people kind of, again, procrastination's the three top
It's a major failure point.
Yeah, it's probably the biggest and most, why have the shopping bag if you've got all the stuff underneath your arms and crammed, in your pockets? You put it into the, yeah.
That would
I
be
should have
good.
picked a different one. Yeah, yeah.
Why do you-
No, they take care of.
Yeah, they do charge individually. We're passing on some of our costs in this per deed. So that's something that, the more homes or the more deeded properties you have, the more it's going to cost. But that's just, it's part of life. Yeah.
What is the ballpark price to put together a trust?
So the question was, what's the ballpark price to put together a trust? I'll give you, do it yourself. If you want to go get some kind of software online, you're probably going to pay a couple $100 minimum. Through us, we're charging $2,500 for a trust to be established. Each additional property or business assignment will be an additional $300 to have the titles redeeded or the deeds redone for that. Nora, I think, quoted a price last year of about a base of about $5,000, and then she would actually run deeds but not file them for you. And I think I forgot what she charged individually. Does that give you an idea of kind of like the ballpark prices that someone might pay?
And just a couple points on that. Don't look for your trust or hot air balloons on Groupon. Like, that's not where you're trying to save money. Or if you need upcoming surgery, don't find your physician on Groupon. If he's offering whatever endectomy that you need on Groupon, you probably find another doctor. So just, that's extra. Like, that's free advice right there. We don't even get charged for that.
We'll charge you more if you like.
And so talk to me about like, how do then we still own it when it's in a trust?
So the question is, I think I'm understanding you correctly, is how much control am I really giving up with a trust? Am I relinquishing control over this asset? Is that fair? So I mean, technically you are giving up ownership. With a revocable trust, you still maintain control. Now, Brandon touched on with like a Medicaid trust, it's irrevocable. That's a whole different animal. That's a pretty intense step to take. But with a trust, it is not once and for all. You can move stuff in and out. I mean, for whatever reason, if you wanted to again, retitle an asset or change a beneficiary, you no longer want your brokerage account to pay. Like, that stuff can all be adjusted. That's the beauty of a revocable trust, is it gives you much, much more control, specificity, and precision, but it can still be changed.
Wouldn't you just become the trustee? But still
Yeah.
have control, even though it's not, you haven't passed, the trustees have.
So as it starts, you're the grantor, the trustee, and the beneficiary. You kind of wear all three hats in something like this. You then have set up trustees that would take over in the event something were to happen to you. In a joint trust, which most people are incorporating with a spouse, they each have equal control. So you're not giving up any type of control, and in fact, you're probably enhancing your control, because now your control actually goes beyond your lifetime. It exceeds.
We can micromanage our kids after our death.
Yeah. Jeff.
So, like, let's just say you had a trust and sell my car and get a new car, and it's not a expensive car. Am I then doing, like, going to you guys twice to like get the deed, I gotta get one to the new house, and then the new vehicle in the truck? Is that how that would work, or?
So the question was like a simple thing like buying a new car, something like that. Do I have to come back to me? The answer is no. You wouldn't have to do that for say a new property or a new car. Now you're welcome to do that, but you would simply it comes with instructions. If you buy a new vehicle, you can put it into the Jeff Trust, the Brandon Renner Trust, and that's actually where the title would sit for a vehicle. A vehicle, if it's in your personal name and you passed away tomorrow, it's technically going to go through probate. Now, your wife or your kids, if some are ultimately going to probably get it, but it's going to have to go through that process of being doled out. Go through the process of probate.
If it's Ford Tempo, you're probably not going to worry
yeah.
about it. If it rhymes with Ferrari, you might.
Logan.
Since I'm up here in Fairbanks, is there a recommended resource to help?
So the question is geographically, how limited are we? And it's any of the 50 states.
Technically, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think Fairbanks still falls under that.
Yeah, we can help somebody in Fairbanks as long as it's not too cold. But we have that capacity to do that.
What's the other question, Log? Okay. Let's maybe just a couple more questions. Anybody else on the floor?
I'll just say, so I went through this process myself. I think I spoke to that a little bit. And the lead slide was an estate plan in 30 minutes. It probably took us a little bit longer than that, but it was really as simple as going through, I guess I work in this industry, so I'm pretty familiar with beneficiaries and all that stuff and making sure that they're up to date. But, the different homes that we have some in different other states, making sure that I knew, I've got 3 children and a wife. Just having their information, social security numbers, birth dates. It's pretty hard for a dad like me sometimes to remember my own birth date, let alone my kids. But it's not that hard. It shouldn't be something that you have to procrastinate on. Really, the process is to go through a questionnaire. You're going to fill out that type of information. What are the properties that you might own? And would you like to have these deeded into something, this trust? And, I think the easiest answer, if you were to do a trust, would be yes. If you have a will, making sure that you designate where that house might go or having some type of transfer on death deed in place. It's easy to procrastinate, I know. It's not a great topic to talk about. Retirement's hard enough to sometimes motivate people to take care of today when they're 45 or 50 and they get to be 60 and they go, oh crap, I should start planning now. Don't wait until you're on your deathbed in the hospital to adjust these types of things.
Why'd you point to them? That wasn't very nice.
He brought it up. Sorry. He said, can I adjust my will on my deathbed? You can. It has happened.
But you're right. It's not
I think of what was the model, Anna Nicole Smith, who married the 89-year-old guy or whatever, and billionaire. He never went through or had any type of estate planning. And, it was, I think, a knockdown, drag-out fight between the kids for years.
We also married Anna Nicole Smith, so
Yeah.
he wasn't making great decisions.
Yeah.
Anyways, but you're right. I mean, it's one thing to sit down with your spouse and be like, what do you want life to look like after you retire? Like, you can dream a little bit. It's a little bit harder to sit down with, hey, Shawnee, what does life look like when we're both dead? It's not
I didn't
fun.
put it like that. I was like,
oh, should I be more tactful?
yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
But just taking care of things.
And I just would say to this, I mean, you mentioned even for you, it was relatively streamlined without getting into detail. You have a more complex financial plan than a lot of folks. But I would encourage you guys just to take small steps.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's just gathering up your kids' dates of birth, social security numbers. Give yourself a runway for this. We kind of have a pick list of information you need. You could start with that. So don't feel like you're going to get up one day and get all this done. Give yourself kind of the smallest steps forward in the right direction. Just build some momentum, because it can feel daunting until you get started. Once you get the momentum going, and this is hypocritical of me because we were supposed to do this last month and we didn't get it finished. But getting that momentum going is really important. Yeah, we can get.
You've got that, right?
I do.
We got something for you. Greg, you had a question?
Having property on the middle of nowhere, can my great grandkids access that property if it stays in a trust? How far does it go?
How many generations will a trust?
I'm not for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not for sure, Greg. Sorry.
So, Miguel says, my situation seems pretty simple. No kids, no spouse. I just want a will. Is that something you guys can help with? And she does unpack that a little bit. She goes, I want my animals cared for. I want my niece to be a beneficiary. So I guess number one, and I apologize if I stepped out and you guys mentioned it. Is Encore only for trust, would it also cover a will? And then she's saying, hey, this is a pretty simple scenario. Is this truly simple enough for a will to cover?
So the question was, and sorry to repeat everything, but I didn't do it for Greg. But is a will adequate for someone in I think she's got one home and bank accounts and some pets that she wants cared for. Yes, that's probably adequate. Things like that home would have to, if she has it designated in a will or having some type of transfer on death deed, would probably be better if there's one simple beneficiary in that instance. Those otherwise will go through probate. But if she has like bank accounts, IRAs, or retirement accounts with us, we can distinctly name beneficiaries on those that go directly and bypass any probate or any court there. The pets is something that it can designate in the will as well.
And yes, we can facilitate that as well.
Yes.
And that's what's made this exciting for us, is because we have a lot of people kind of in that gray area where a trust would certainly be helpful, but if it costs 10 times as much as a will, is it really worth it? And but to be able to scale this thing to bring costs down, where people that are kind of in that in between can make this the leap to a trust without adding a lot of complexity or hassle or expense. But there's certainly situations where a will is sufficient.
You've got one more. When a vehicle is currently titled in my name, is it better to transfer it into my revocable trust or simply file a TOD, transfer on death, designation with the DMV? Asterisk, the vehicle does not own.
So the question was about titling a vehicle, whether it can go to a TOD or revocable living trust. You could pick either. If you do a revocable or if you do a TOD, it's distinctly going to go directly to the person that you name in that. If you name the trust, then that asset is handled how the trust dictates it's handled. So if there's more than one beneficiary in it, then that gets handled. So you can pick in either instance. And we hit it on it earlier, that's applicable for a lot of assets. Your retirement accounts. There probably comes a point in time for me with one minor child and two adults where I no longer have contingent beneficiaries being a trust. It's going to migrate to them directly. Because why go through all that effort and time to have it go into a trust, and then it has to come back through and handle with the trustee, all that stuff. So it's more like, how do you want it handled in timeframe?
So, I mean, it just depends on the desires of the individual. Kind
Yeah.
of back to your question, Gerard, that's what's nice about a revocable trust is as your plans change, your desires change, you can move things, right? You're not stuck with that asset heading this direction. Any closing thoughts, Brandon, or let's say any last words, but in context, that would,
That's not a good one.
yeah.
Last words. I just think I thanks for everyone for coming tonight. You all stayed awake. I didn't see any heads hit the ground, falling asleep. But I would probably, if you have questions, feel free to, you can look me up on the website, email me. You can ask Chad, send him the hard ones. But I think, getting started on something, the first easiest thing is making sure that you've got some form, how do these assets that you've worked hard all your life pass to the people that you care about? Whether it's through a will, a trust, some combination of transfer on death deeds that we talked about. Start putting that together. It's important. We've seen and had, too many people walk through our doors when they're in crisis. Whether it's a widow who doesn't understand or a widower or kids who are, wanting to preserve the legacy of their parents, maybe the home that they shared with them, those types of things. And they're basically forced in that time period to deal with problems that they just would rather not have to deal with. And that would be my get started.
Small steps in the right direction.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate everybody coming. And
Thank you.
there's a little bit of food left. If anybody wants any?